What if the fairy tale ending we all remember wasn't the final chapter? What if the balcony kiss, the white limo, and the music that played as the credits rolled was only the beginning of a much bigger love story? For over 3 decades, fans of Pretty Woman have wondered what happened next. Did Edward and Vivian truly live happily ever after? Or did life, with all its twists and turns, write a very different ending for them? Now imagine this. The year is 2025. Time has passed. People have changed. And love is no longer just about wild sparks and chance encounters. It's about choices, forgiveness, and the courage to start over. This is Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance. A sequel not just about romance, but about rediscovering love when the world thinks it's too late. The story begins back in 1990, when the world first met a wealthy businessman named Edward Lewis. Edward was a man of power, a man used to making deals and buying companies, but behind the suits and luxury, he was also a lonely soul. His life was about control, profit, and success, but not about connection. That all changed the night he met Vivian Ward. Vivian was different. She was a free spirit, a woman with dreams bigger than the streets she walked. She wasn't polished or perfect by society's standards, but she was full of life, humor, and honesty. When Edward hired her to be his companion for a week, neither of them knew that their lives were about to change forever. At first, their worlds couldn't be more different. Edward lived in penthouses, drove expensive cars, and made deals worth millions. Vivian lived day to day, surviving with grit and charm. But as they spent time together, something magical began to happen. The walls Edward built around himself started to fall, and Vivian discovered a version of herself she didn't even know existed, one full of confidence, worth, and possibility. The film gave us unforgettable moments. Vivian walking into luxury boutiques, being judged, and then triumphantly returning with the line, "Big mistake. Huge." The scene at the opera house, where Edward showed her a world of beauty and elegance, and she showed him how to see joy in the little things. And of course, the ending, Edward showing up in a white limo, climbing up the fire escape, declaring his love, and asking, so what happens after he climbs up and rescues her? To which Vivian replied, she rescues him right back. It was a perfect ending, or at least that's what we thought. Because the truth is, real life isn't always like a fairy tale. After the credits rolled, after the music faded, what happened next? Did Edward and Vivian really find happiness? Or did the weight of their different worlds catch up with them? This is where the sequel begins. Not by erasing the magic of the original, but by asking the question fans have carried for decades. What if love doesn't end at happily ever after? What if love needs a second chance? It has been 35 years since Edward Lewis climbed that fire escape with roses in his hand. 35 years since Vivian Ward laughed through tears and pulled him into her arms. The moment was unforgettable, but time, as it always does, had its own plans. The year is 2025. The world is faster, sharper, and harsher than the dreamy backdrop of Beverly Hills in 1990. Cell phones replaced phone booths. Skyscrapers stretched higher. People chased success with an even hungrier fire. Somewhere in this new age, Edward and Vivian's story took a turn that no one saw coming. For a while, they lived the fairy tale. Trips to Paris, nights at the opera, lazy mornings filled with laughter. But life is not just made of champagne and limousines. Business pressures pulled Edward back into the world of ruthless deals. Vivian, with her newfound confidence, wanted something different. A life where love was about partnership, not rescue. Slowly, the cracks began to show. Arguments replaced laughter. Distance replaced closeness. Eventually, the couple who once defied the odds quietly parted ways. Vivian built a new life. No longer the woman who waited to be chosen, she became the one who chose her own path. She used her past not as a chain, but as a ladder, starting a foundation that helped women escape cycles of poverty, fear, and judgment. People once dismissed her as just a girl from the streets, but in 2025, Vivian Ward is a name that carries power, compassion, and resilience. Edward, on the other hand, found himself lost in the very world he once thought defined him. He sold his empire, but the victory felt hollow. Retirement left him with wealth, but no warmth. Success, but no soul. He had everything, and yet he had nothing. Time passed. Regrets grew, and the memory of Vivian, the woman who once taught him how to feel alive, haunted him more than any lost business deal. And then fate, in the way it always surprises us, pulled their stories back together. It happened at a gala, a glittering charity event in Los Angeles, where the city's richest and most powerful gathered to write checks, clink glasses, and pose for cameras. Edward, invited by old friends, walked in, expecting another night of empty conversation. Vivian, now the face of her foundation, was there not as a guest, but as the cause. And when their eyes met across the room, silver hair, wiser smiles, older eyes, the world seemed to freeze, if only for a second. That moment wasn't about reliving the past. It wasn't about falling into old habits. It was about recognition. Two people who had lived entire lives apart, suddenly realizing that the story between them was not over. But this isn't a fairy tale anymore. It's not about rescuing or being rescued. It's about second chances. About asking the terrifying question, can love survive time, mistakes, and regret? In Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance, the magic isn't in a limousine pulling up to a curb. The magic is in the courage it takes to face someone you once loved. After decades of silence, and admit that your heart never truly moved on, this is not just a sequel. It's a story about what happens after the credits. About what love means when the sparkle fades, and when happily ever after is no longer guaranteed. Asterisk, every sequel needs more than just a reunion. It needs growth. It needs characters who are no longer who they once were, but who carry the scars, the victories, and the mistakes of the years in between. Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance doesn't simply bring Edward and Vivian back together. It shows us who they've become, and why their second chance matters even more than their first. Vivian Ward, the fighter who became a builder Vivian, is no longer the girl who lived day to day, hustling for survival. She is a woman who rebuilt herself brick by brick in a world that once underestimated her. Instead of running from her past, she embraced it. She turned her own struggles into a mission, creating a foundation that gives women what she once needed most: dignity, safety, and opportunity. But Vivian's strength comes with shadows. She still remembers the heartbreak of Edward leaving. She still wonders if she was ever truly enough for him, or if their worlds were simply too different to stay united. And though she wears her independence like armor, inside she longs for a love that isn't about saving or being saved, but about equality. For Vivian, this second chance is not about becoming the woman she once was, but about finally being loved as the woman she has become. Edward Lewis, the man who had everything. But nothing Edward has always been a man of power. In the first film, he was ruthless, yet charming, a businessman who bought and sold companies like pieces on a chessboard. But the older Edward we meet now is not the same. Age has given him wisdom, but also regret. He sees the years behind him and wonders what he traded away for success. Money, status, reputation, he has them all. But love, real love, slipped through his fingers. Vivian was the one person who showed him what it meant to feel alive, and yet somewhere along the way, he let her go. This sequel asks, can a man who once controlled everything finally surrender not to deals or money, but to love? Edward's arc is not about proving his wealth. It's about proving his heart, the new generation. Reflections of the past, every great love story is more powerful when it shows how love ripples into the future. That's why Pretty Woman 2 introduces a new generation of characters who carry their parents' choices in their own lives. Vivian's daughter, born after her breakup with Edward, is a reminder of resilience. She admires her mother's independence, but secretly wonders if love is worth the pain it caused. Vivian. She becomes the mirror to Vivian's younger self, a girl full of dreams but scared of disappointment. Through her, we see what Vivian once was, and what she hopes her daughter never has to be: Edward's estranged son. On the other hand, represents the wounds of neglect. He grew up in the shadow of a father who was too busy building empires. Now, as a grown man, he carries bitterness, not just toward Edward, but toward the very idea of love. His presence forces Edward to confront not only the mistakes he made with Vivian, but also the failures he made as a father. When these younger characters collide, their doubts, fears, and choices echo the very struggles that Edward and Vivian faced decades ago. And in their journey, we see the cycle of love, fragile, powerful, and always in need of second chances. The heart of their arcs, what makes these character arcs unique, is that they aren't about beginnings, but about returns. Vivian and Edward aren't learning what love is for the first time. They're learning if it can last when tested by time. The new generation isn't simply side characters. They are the reflection of what happens when love is lost, when mistakes echo forward, and when the courage of one generation can inspire the healing of the next. The night begins with nothing special. Another glittering charity gala in downtown Los Angeles. The ballroom is alive with music, polished laughter, and the clinking of champagne glasses. Photographers flash their cameras, capturing gowns worth fortunes and smiles that cost even more. For most of the guests, it's just another night of appearances. But for Edward Lewis, it is a night he almost didn't attend. He stands near the edge of the room, his silver hair catching the warm glow of chandeliers. His tuxedo is sharp, but his posture is heavy. He's not here for the cause, not really. He's here because an old business associate insisted, because silence at home felt louder than the noise of this party. He's here out of habit, not hope. And then he sees her. Vivian, not the wide-eyed dreamer of 35 years ago. Not the woman in a thrifted dress standing awkwardly in the lobby of a luxury hotel. No, the Vivian he sees now commands the room. She isn't hidden in the shadows anymore. She is the center of them. In a flowing, elegant gown, speaking with donors and supporters of her foundation, she radiates a presence that money can't buy. She is confident, graceful, and more breathtaking than he remembers, not because of the dress or the lights, but because she has become exactly who she was always meant to be. Edward feels his breath catch, a strange mix of pride and regret rising in his chest. He almost looks away, almost retreats into the safety of anonymity, but it's too late. Vivian turns mid-conversation, and their eyes meet. For a heartbeat, the years dissolve. He sees her as she was, and she sees him as he was. The laughter, the balcony, the limousine, it all flickers in the space between them. And then, just as quickly, the years return. Wrinkles, silver hair, unspoken apologies. The room keeps moving. Music swells. People laugh. Glasses clink. But for Edward and Vivian, the world narrows to silence. Vivian doesn't rush toward him. She doesn't smile, nor does she frown. She simply watches, steady and calm, the way a woman who has built her own world learns to watch. Edward, on the other hand, feels his pulse race in a way he hasn't felt in decades. He takes a step forward, then another. Every step is heavier than the last, weighed down by questions. What if she hates me? What if I ruined my chance forever? What if this is nothing more than a ghost of a memory? Finally, they stand before each other. Vivian, Edward says, his voice softer than he intended. Edward, she replies, steady, controlled, but with a flicker in her eyes, a spark of something she refuses to let show to Isley. There are no hugs, no dramatic tears. Just two people facing the living history between them. The conversation that follows is not about grand gestures. It's about subtleties. Vivian mentions her foundation, the women she helps, the cause that drives her. Edward listens, though part of him aches at the distance in her tone. He tells her about his retirement, about letting go of the empire that once defined him. Vivian nods politely but doesn't indulge nostalgia, and yet, beneath their words lies something unspoken. A current that neither time nor distance could erase. Vivian excuses herself to return to her guests. But before she leaves, she glances at Edward one more time. This glance is not the look of a stranger. It's not the look of a lover either. It's the look of someone deciding whether to open a door or keep it closed forever. Edward watches her walk away, the weight of decades pressing harder on his chest. He realizes in that moment that this is not about reliving the past. If there is a chance, even the smallest one, to stand beside Vivian again, he must prove he is not the man who once left her behind. The reunion does not end with a kiss or a dance. It ends with silence, tension, and possibility. And that is what makes it powerful. Because love that once burned brightly is no longer a flame to be lit instantly. It is an ember that must be patiently coaxed back to life. This is only the beginning. Asterisk love stories are not broken by silence alone. They are tested by the weight of the world. For Edward and Vivian, the reunion was not the finish line. It was the spark that reignited a storm. For Vivian, seeing Edward again awakens feelings she fought years to bury. He was the man who opened the door to her worth, the man who made her believe she deserved more than the world ever told her. But he was also the man who let her walk away. His absence shaped her as much as his love once did. Now, as a leader of a foundation that helps women rise, she cannot allow herself to be pulled back into a story of dependency. If Edward wants a second chance, he must prove that love isn't about rescue, but about respect. For Edward, the challenge is even greater. He's a man who built his life on control, on closing deals, on always winning. But this is not a business negotiation. This is a battle with his own mistakes. He must confront the years he wasted chasing success while neglecting the one thing that mattered most. Worse still, Edward is not just facing Vivian's guarded heart. He is facing his own son. Edward's estranged son carries the wound of abandonment. To him, Edward's return to Vivian isn't romantic, it's selfish. He sees it as another distraction, another way his father puts emotion before responsibility. Their conflict is not subtle. It's sharp, angry, and raw. Every conversation is a reminder of the price Edward paid for his ambition, a broken family. It's a son who never felt chosen. And yet, Vivian's daughter offers the other side of the coin. She believes in her mother's strength, but she also sees the loneliness in her eyes. She questions whether her mother's independence has built walls too high for love to enter again. To her, Edward isn't just a mistake of the past. He is a possibility. A chance for her mother to finally be happy beyond her work, but the conflict doesn't remain inside the walls of family. There is an external storm brewing. Vivian's foundation, her life's work, is under threat. A powerful corporation is trying to shut it down. The kind of ruthless takeover Edward himself would have orchestrated decades ago. Now he must choose, stand by her cause, and fight against the very world he once belonged to, or risk losing her again. This is the true heart of the conflict. Edward cannot simply win Vivian back with flowers, limousines, or nostalgia. He must prove through action that he has changed. That love is not a grand gesture, but a sacrifice. That this time, he will not walk away. The beauty of the central conflict in Pretty Woman 2, A Second Chance, is that it's not about whether they love each other. We already know they do. It's about whether love, tested by decades of distance, regret, and betrayal, can survive. Whether two people who once completed each other can rebuild trust brick by brick. Vivian's arc demands respect. Edward's arc demands redemption. The new generation demands truth. And the foundation, threatened, fragile, but worth saving, becomes the perfect symbol of their relationship itself. If it can survive, so can they. The central conflict does not ask, will they fall in love again? It asks something far more powerful. Can love broken by time be strong enough to heal?